Maseches Yevamos Daf Yud Ches has two primary sugyas. It contains one Mishnah. The first 3/4 of the daf discusses the sugya of Zika and Machlokas Amoraim, whether Zika is considered to be a marriage as far as certain halachos, with a couple of proofs on that subject and an explanation of who holds what. Then we get to the Mishnah, which will revisit the topic of Eishes Ach Shel Haya Ba'olamo and introduce the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara will analyze what exactly Rabbi Shimon holds in a conversation that takes us well into the next daf. So we're discussing, let's begin, the topic of Zika. Zika means the connection that a woman who's falling to Yibum has to the man who's supposed to do Yibum. So let's familiarize ourselves with some terms. The woman falling to Yibum is called a Yevama. The man she's falling to is called a Yavam. She's also called a Zikuka because she has what's called a Zika to him. That connection that she's obligated to do Yibum to him is called a Zika connection. And the Gemara is discussing whether that Zika there's a lock between them, the bond between them. Does that create certain marriage aspects for the relevance of, does it aser relatives? So, for example, if a woman has a Zika to a man, is he allowed to marry her mother? Is he allowed to marry her mother after she dies? If she was his wife, she would be also to marry her mother, and also to marry her mother after she dies. However, she's not his wife, she's a Zika. She's a skuka. Does that create a connection there? Also, if there's a tsaras zika, so if you have a woman who has a zika and somebody else who's a tsara to that woman who has a zika, does that create a patur on the tsara because she's a tsaras erva? How does this work? Does the zika count as a marriage? Does it not count as a marriage? So that's the Gemara's topic. The Gemara has introduced the machlokes already. We have a machlokes between Rav Huna in the name of Rav and Rav Yehuda. The Gemara will say soon that Rav Yehuda is quoting Shmuel. So it's early Amoraim, Rav and Shmuel, late Amoraim, Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda on the topic. So Rav Huna says, Ein Zika, there is no Zika. The Zika does not create a surim. A man is allowed to marry the mother of his Zikuka. Rav Yehuda says there is a Zika, and a man is also to marry the mother of his Zikuka even after the Zikuka has died, she's no longer there, that Isser still exists. The Gemara says there's two chidushim, or two levels which we have to bring in. Not only is there a zika, there's also a zika after the death of the skuka, that relationship still exists, and there's also a zika even if there are two yavams, even if there are two men who could theoretically be involved in this zika, this woman falls to Yibum to two brothers, she still has an equal zika to both of them. These are two chidushim that we have to spell out, we would not have known otherwise. The Gemara is now going to bring proofs. Is there a zika or is there not a zika? So Gemara's first proof is from our most recent Mishnah, which is why we're getting into the subject here. So our Mishnah discussed the concept of Eishes Ach Shel Haya Ba'olamo. So the case again is where Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, where Ruvain and Shimon are brothers. Ruvain is married to a woman, he dies without children. That woman falls to Yibum to Shimon. Shimon has another wife. And then, after the death of Ruvain, Levi is born. Levi is an Eishes Ach Shel Haya Ba'olamo to Ruvain, and therefore there is no mitzvah of Yibum between Levi and the Yavam, and the Yevama. Now, if Shimon then goes and he does Yibum, or even if he did Yibum before Levi is born at some point, that we'll discuss later. But if Yibum happens between the woman, the wife of Ruvain and Shimon, and now Shimon is married to two women, he's married to the Eishes Shel Haya Ba'olamo of Levi as well as his own wife, then Shimon dies without children, and both those women fall to Levi. Then you have two women falling to him. One is an Eishes Shel Haya Ba'olamo from Ruvain's marriage, and the other is her tzara. Eishes Shel Haya Ba'olamo is an Isser. There is no mitzvah of Yibum there, and therefore she's patur from Yibum as an Eishes Shel Haya Ba'olamo, and her tzara is a tzara serva, and they're both patur. Now, the Mishnah had said, what happens if Shimon didn't do a full Yibum? Shimon did what's called Maimer, which is a quasi-marriage. There, we have a problem, because we have a quasi-marriage, it's not really a full marriage. In a case like that, the tzara is a quasi-tzaras erva, because the relationship between Shimon and the Eishes Shel Haya Ba'olamo is only quasi, it's only Maimer, it's only Kedushin in a place where we're supposed to do Yibum. Case like that, the Mishnah said it's chaletzas v'lo misivem, she has to do chalitza because she's in a sense, she's a quasi tzaras erva, not a full, therefore she can't do Yibum, but she does require chalitza. So the Gemara says, why don't you just say that even if Shimon did not do Maimer, she's still a quasi-marriage because you have a Zika. Even before the Maimer is performed by Shimon to the former wife of Ruvain, there is a Zika there. Ruvain's wife has a Zika to his brother Shimon. So therefore, the tzara, Shimon's other wife, should be a tzaras Zikukasa. Tsaras zikukasa should also be considered a quasi-marriage to some extent, that it should aser her as a tsaras eshes achshahaya ba'olamo. So when she falls to Levi, she's a tsaras eshes achshahaya ba'olamo because of the Zika connection that was there. So Gemara says that obviously proves that you do not say that there's a Zika. There should be a proof to the opinion that says Ein Zika. So the Gemara says you're right, but it's not a proof. You're right that there is a quasi-connection there, and this woman is pater as a tsaras eshes achshahaya ba'olamo through Zika, and the same halacha would apply even if Shimon never did any maimer, just because of the Zika. If that's true, why didn't the Mishnah just talk about the case where Shimon didn't do maimer at all, and just say that the tzara is pater because she's a tsaras eshes achshahaya ba'olamo through Zika? They could have said that. Then you would not know that the same halacha is true even if he did do maimer, because you have the opinion of Beis Shammai that says that maimer counts as a full marriage. If that would be true, then this wife would be a full-fledged marriage, and he would say that she can get a full. She does not have a quasi-marriage to Shimon. She has a full marriage to Shimon, and when they fall to Yibam, you have a eshes achshahaya ba'olamo and a tsaras eshes achshahaya ba'olamo, and they're both pater completely. There's no requirement to do chalitza at all. Therefore, you have to go away. You have to avoid the opinion of Beis Shammai and show that even in the case where we did a maimer, it's still only quasi, and she cannot do. She is not free without having chalitza, because it's only quasi. The marriage is only quasi, and to some extent she's still not considered. The tzara is not considered a tzara eshes achshahaya ba'olamo and does require chalitza. All right, that's the Gemara's first proof and answer. Now the Gemara's second proof and answer, brought by Abaye. Abaye discusses a case which we will have on the next daf Yud Tes, which is the following scenario. Very similar case. You have a woman who's eshes achshahaya ba'olamo who's falling to Yibam, so she falls to Yibam to Shimon. In this case, though, Shimon wanted to do maimer and he did not get a chance to do maimer. Before he had a chance to do maimer, he died. So here the Mishnah says, the halacha is that she is ochaletzes o misyabem. It's not she herself. She herself is an eshes achshahaya ba'olamo, but her tzara is ochaletzes o misyabem. The reason is because there's no real connection between the eshes achshahaya ba'olamo and her. They were never really a tzaras. They were never really tzaros, because the eshes achshahaya ba'olamo never married Shimon. Shimon intended on marrying her, but she never did. Therefore, the Shimon's other wife is not a tzaras anything, and she could do either Yibam or chalitza, full regular halacha. So Mar says, how is this possible? There was a connection between the eshes achshahaya ba'olamo and Shimon. There was a zika. If you hold of the opinion of yesh zika, then this woman should still be a quasi tzaras erva, because there was a connection between the Yavam and Shimon, and this was the tzara of that connection. So obviously you're seeing from the fact that she's allowed to do Yibam if she wants, that we say Ein Zika, there's no connection at all. So Gemara says, you're right, this is a good proof. This Mishnah clearly holds Ein Zika, but that's because it's the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Meir holds Ein Zika. The Gemara says, are you sure that Rabbi Meir holds Ein Zika? How could you say that Rabbi Meir holds Ein Zika? I'll show you clearly that Rabbi Meir holds Yesh Zika, and that's the case of four brothers, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Reuven and Shimon are married to two sisters. Reuven and Shimon die. The two sisters fall to Yibam to Levi and Yehuda. Now each of these sisters has a Zika to Yibam to both of them, and is the sister of the other one who has a Zika to Yibam. So both of them are achos zkukaso. And over here, Rabbi Meir says, the halacha is that neither of them are allowed to do Yibam because they are achos zkukaso. They have to both do chalitza. Being achos zkukaso is not a full p'tor, it's only a problem to do Yibam, and therefore they require chalitza and not Yibam. So if you you clearly see over here that Rabbi Meir holds that there is a Zika, because if there was no Zika, like you're claiming, they should each be allowed to do Yibam to one of them because they're falling to Yibam, and not worry about the fact that she's a sister of a Zikuka. So the Gemara says, no. Rabbi Meir really holds that there is Ein Zika, and you should be allowed to do Yibam here. The reason that he says to do Chalitza and not Yibam is because he's worried about something else. He's worried that if one of them gets up and does Yibam, then what might happen is before the other one gets a chance to do Yibam, he may die. If he dies, now the second sister has to fall to Yibam to the one who's already married, and did Yibam to the first sister, and she can't because she's now the sister of his wife. She's an Achos Isha. Then she will not fall to Yibam at all. She'll be free to go to the street and have a P'tor. We have a rule. You're not allowed to be Mavatal Mitzvah Yibam. You're not allowed to create a scenario where the Mitzvah of Yibam will be blocked. Once it occurs, you're not allowed to undo the Zika by creating an erva situation. Therefore, we say to him, don't do Yibum. If you were to do Yibum, the first one to do Yibum will tell him not to do Yibum, because if he does, he may create a situation where he'll end up blocking the other. He'll end up freeing the other one from Yibum if the second brother should die. Now, if he does Chalitza, it's not a problem. He'll do Chalitza on the first one, and then he can do Chalitza on the second one. He can do Chalitza to both of them. Theoretically, Rashi points out he could do Chalitza on the first one and then Yibum to the second one, but we won't allow that as Gzeira, so that we don't have the other situation falling that we do not want to happen. So therefore, the reason that Rabbi Meir says not to do Yibum in this case is not because of Zika, he really holds Ein Zika, but it's because of Asr Levatel Mitzvah Yibum. So he says, hold on, you're telling me that Rabbi Meir holds the following two opinions. He holds Ein Zika, but you cannot destroy, you cannot create a situation where you're Mavatel, where you cancel the Mitzvah of Yibum. But Rabbi Gamliel holds Ein Zika, and he holds you are allowed to Mavatel Mitzvah Yibum. Now, what's that case? So we have a case with Rabbi Meir where we see that Rabbi Gamliel holds Ein Zika, and in that same opinion, he holds you're allowed to be Mavatel Mitzvah Yibum. What's the case over there? So the Gemara explains the case over there is you have two brothers that are married to two sisters. One of them is married to an adult, and one of them is married to a child, a Gedola and a Ketana. So let's say Reuven and Shimon. Reuven's married to the Gedola, Shimon's married to the Ketana. Reuven dies without children, and now Reuven's wife falls to Shimon, who's married to this woman's sister who's just a Ketana. Now the problem is a marriage to a Ketana here could be cancelled through Min. We're talking about a Ketana which was married by her mother, by her brother. It's only a marriage d'Rabbanan, it's not a real marriage. Now what's happening then is Shimon has a unreal marriage to his original wife, and now he has a Zika to Reuven's former wife who's an adult. So the Tanakama over there says, we tell him we tell the Ketana she has to do Miyun, she has to get out of that marriage. She is also to be together with him because she is the Achos Ziku Koso. Reuven's wife, who's her sister, is now a Skuka, and she doesn't have a real marriage to cancel that. She only had a D'Rabbanan marriage. She's an Achos Ziku, so she has to therefore cancel the marriage and walk away. Now, Shimon then would do Yibum to Reuven's wife. Now, Rabbi Gamliel disagrees, and Rabbi Gamliel says no. We say that, first of all, she's not Achos Skukasa. Achos Skukasa is not a problem because they hold Ein Zika. So the child here is not an issue. Shimon's first wife is nothing wrong with the fact that she now has a sister who is a Skuka to her husband. No issue because we hold Ein Zika. Now, there's another thing that's at play here, and that is if we allow Shimon to stay married to the Ketana, it's going to end up canceling the Yibum of the Gedolah who's falling to him to Yibum, of Reuven's wife who's falling to him to Yibum because that's his wife's sister. Now, Rabbi Gamliel therefore says though that that's not a problem. He says we are not afraid of that, and therefore what we say is the following psak. We say Shimon, stay married to your wife who's a Ketana. If she wants to do me, and she's allowed to. But if she doesn't want to, she could stay and wait until she becomes an adult. Once she becomes an adult, then marriage becomes a marriage d'oraisa. And now Reuven's wife is freed from Yibum because she is an achos ishto. She is the sister of Shimon's wife who has now grown up and graduated to a d'oraisa marriage. So two things are happening there. First of all, Ein Zika. The Ketana is not ushered him as the sister of this Kuka. And second of all, we don't say Asr Levatel Mitzvahs Yibum. If we did, we would say he has to get rid of her. Because by staying married to her when she becomes an adult, is being Mavatel, the Mitzvah Yibum, to Reuven's wife that he had on him before his original wife became an adult. So therefore, you see, Gamliel holds those two opinions together, which seems to show that those two opinions go together. So how could you tell me here that Rabbi Meir holds Ein Zika, and the reason that he said that you can't do Yibum, they have to Chalitza, not Yibum, in his case, of the four brothers, is because of Asr Levatel Mitzvah Yibum. Those two opinions should not go together. Someone says, what kind of question is this? Those two opinions go together in Rabbi Gamliel. They don't go together in Rabbi Meir, who said that just because Rabbi Gamliel holds both of them, Rabbi Meir has to hold of both of them. He holds Asr Levatel Mitzvahs Yibum, and he holds Ein Zika. He doesn't hold that like Rabban Gamliel, that is no problem being Mavatel Mitzvahs Yibum. The Gemara says no. My question was stronger than that. My question was that Rabbi Meir is saying Asr Levatel Mitzvahs Yibum even in a case where it's only a suffix. The whole Mitzvahs Yibum in Rabbi Meir's case is we're afraid that Yehuda is going to die, is that if Levi does Yibum and then Yehuda dies before he gets a chance to do anything, then the other woman will fall to Yibum to him and she won't be able to because she'll be an Achosisha. So that's a whole suffix, and based on that he's saying not to do Yibum in the first place, because if a suffix maybe will come to a scenario of Asr Levatel, of being Mavatel Mitzvahs Yibum, and it's also to push itself in a scenario of even suffix being Mavatel Mitzvahs Yibum. However, you want to say that Rabbi Gamliel holds it even in a vadai where you're for sure being mavatal mitzvahs yibum, like the case of the katana, you're allowed to go to be mavatal. That's odd that it's such a wide machlokes that Rabbi Meir says you're allowed to, that you're not allowed to even misafek, and Rabbi Meir says you're allowed to even mivadai. We want to assume that that couldn't be an actual scenario, that they are so far apart in their opinions. Usually the opinions are closer together. So Gemara says no, it's not a problem. Maybe they really are far apart in their opinions, and therefore you don't have a proof. All right, now the Gemara wants to establish that Rav Yehuda, the Tana, who was the one who held the Yesh Zika, he said that because he was quoting Shmuel, and he wasn't saying it in his own name. So the Gemara says, we'll see that Shmuel holds also Yesh Zika. Where do you see that? And that's because Shmuel paskins like Rav Yehuda ben Seira in a different case, and that's the case of Shemeret Yavam, Shekidesh, Achiv Esachosa. That is, you have Ruvain, who dies without children, and his wife falls to Yibam, to Shimon and Levi, and then while that's going on, Levi goes and he's Mekadesh, he gives Kedushin to the woman's sister. He's now given Kedushin to the sister of his Zekuka, Achos Zekukoso. So what happens over there? So the Tanakhama says he's not allowed to do that, it's an Achos Zekukoso. Yudbim Seir says, you say to him, listen, wait. Don't do Yibum yet. Don't marry her yet, because she's achos zekuka. So wait until Shimon does Yibum. Once Shimon does Yibum, she'll be completely free. Then you can marry her, no problem. Until then, do not. She's achos zekuka. So wait till the Zika falls off when Shimon does Yibum. So there you clearly see that Rav Yehuda ben Seira is holding Yesh Zika. He's not allowed to. We do not allow Levi to complete the marriage because the woman that he was mekadesh is an achos zekuka. So the Shmuel says the halachas like Rav Yehuda ben Seira there. So you see the Shmuel holds Yesh Zika. So now the Gemara says, why is it so important to us to say that Rav Yehuda was quoting Shmuel? Maybe Rav Yehuda was quoting Rav. Rav Yehuda is a Talmud of both Rav and Shmuel. The Gemara says it couldn't be that Rav Yehuda was quoting Rav because we already said Rav Huna quoted Rav, who said Ein Zika. So the Gemara says, okay, well maybe it's a machlokas amarayim between Rav Yehuda and Rav Huna. What Rav held? The Gemara said, no, listen, if we know that Shmuel holds Yesh Zika, and we know that there's an Amor that says a Rav holds Ein Zika, why would we want to make a machlokas what Rav holds? Better off saying that Rav Yehuda was quoting Shmuel, and it works out very nicely. Shmuel we already know holds Yesh Zika. Rav, we have somebody quoting holds Ein Zika, so Rav and Shmuel are disputing this, and one holds Yesh Zika, one holds Ein Zika. So the Gemara says that Rav Kahana said this over to Rav Zvid, and Rav Zvid said we have it, what was originally taught straight out in that way. Rav Yehuda said his halacha in the name of Shmuel. He said that a man is allowed to marry the mother of his zekuka. He is not allowed to. That is, he is not allowed to marry the mother of his zekuka because of Yesh Zika, and he's quoting Shmuel. Shmuel goes according to his reasoning because he also like Yehuda ben Seira in the case of where woman fell to Yibum to both Shimon and Levi went and was Mekadesh, her sister, that he has to wait until Shimon does Yibum so that she's not achos zekuka in order to be able to marry her. So you see that Shmuel spelled out both of these halachas. The Gemara says, why does Shmuel have to say both of them? The Gemara says very simple. The case of the mother that he's allowed to marry, that he's not allowed to marry the mother of his zekuka, that's even after the zekuka dies. That's to teach me that we say Zika is a thing even after the death of the zekuka. And the other one is to show that even while there's two brothers, where there was a Shimon and a Levi, so it's a split zekuka. The Zika is shared and it's weaker. Still, we say it's strong enough that he should not marry the woman he was Mekadesh until her status as a Zekuka ends by his brother Shimon doing Yibum. This concludes the Gemara's discussion to the Mishnah. Now we get to the Mishnah, which goes back to the topic of Eishes Ach Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. And this is going to be very similar to our original Mishnah in the beginning of the Masechta. In the beginning of the parak, that is, in the beginning of the parak described Eishes Ach Shelo Haya Ba'olamo, and it spoke about the case of what happens where their maimer was done. This is the exact same case, exact same discussion. The difference is the order of whether Yibum was done before the brother was born or the brother was born before Yibum. And here we're going to bring in that Rabbi Shimon disagrees with this entire thing. So again, the case of Eishes Ach Shelo Haya Ba'olamo works as follows. Reuven is married to a woman. Reuven has a brother Shimon. Reuven dies without children. And then the following two things happen. Levi's born and Shimon does Yibum. Which one happens first? So in our first Mishnah, the order was that first Levi was born, and therefore Levi was born while the woman was just a zekuka, and she now had a zika to him, and that zika was a zika that was forbidden for him to do because he was not alive at the same time as Reuven. So our Mishnah here says that even if the order was that the Yibum happened first. Shimon did Yibum first, and then Levi was born. So by the time Levi was born, this woman was already married to Shimon in a regular marriage. There's no Zika anymore. There was never any connection between her and Levi. Still, there's an Isser Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo because she was married to Ruvain, and he was not alive while Ruvain was alive. Now, both of these, therefore, the Tanna Kamma holds, both are cases of Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo. Now, both Mishnayos, both this one and the previous one, say that if Shimon didn't do Yibum to the woman, he only did Maimer, so it's quasi. So, and then Shimon died, so his tzara would be Choletzes V'Mis Yabemes, because she is a tzara of a quasi Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo marriage, a quasi tzaras erba. Now, this Mishnah continues and says Rav Shimon disagrees. And Rav Shimon says that Levi is allowed to do Yibum. If Shimon then goes ahead and dies, Levi is allowed to do Yibum, both to Shimon's original wife, who is the Tzaras Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo, and to the woman that Shimon's married to, who came to him from Yibum, from Ruvain, who is the Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo herself. Obviously, Rav Shimon does not hold of the Yisur Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo in this scenario. Now again, our Mishnah here is discussing the easier case, which is that the Yibum happened before Levi was born, and he was never Zakuk to this woman. It says the Gemara, Rav Oshi says, Rav Shimon argues even in the first case, the first Mishnah, where Levi was born before the Yibum happened, and there was a Zika to him, and you might think that there was a Zika with an Isser Eshes Ach there, and therefore he would agree that it's Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo, and she's also to him, and she's an Erva, but no, Shimon says even in that case, there's no problem of Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo here. How do you see that? Simply because why do we need both Mishnayos? One of these two Mishnayos is extra. We are all in agreement that it is more likely that he's called an Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo, which is Aser, if he was born first. So let us just learn that Mishnah where he was born first. We know that the Rabbanan hold that in this case where he was born first, and if he wasn't born at all, in both cases there's still in the Shita of the Chachamim will hold that both cases are Aser. It would make more sense to say the case where he was born after the Yibum, which is our case, and then we could learn that the first case where he was born first is Aser for sure. Why do we have to say both cases? In the Chachamim, we don't need both the cases. Obviously, the reason we need both cases is to show that Rav Shimon disagrees in both cases. If he only disagreed in this case, where he was born before the Yibum, then he would say so. We would only need this case. We wouldn't need the first Mishnah at all. Obviously, the reason that both are said is because he disagrees in both cases, and you have to say both of them to show how strong each opinion runs and extends. So therefore, we have to say the case where he was born before the Yibum happens to show that even in that case, Reb Shimon disagrees, and Reb Shimon holds that he's mutter, even though there was a zikuka, there was a zika that was aser. And we also have to say the case where he was born after the Yibum Shalit, even in that case, the Chachamim go so far as to aser that case. Now, you'll ask me, why does Reb Shimon only argue on this case? Simple, we allowed the Chachamim to finish their shita. They said both cases in which they hold before Reb Shimon chimed in with the fact that he argues, but really argues on both of them, not just on this one. Okay, so now the Gemara says, so what is then the case where Reb Shimon holds of Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo? How do you have an Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo? We said in both of these he holds that it's not Aser. So the Gemara says there are two cases of Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo. The first one is where there's no problem of brothers or anything. You have Ruvain is married to a woman, Ruvain dies, and then after he dies, Shimon's born. Shimon's in Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo. This woman who was married to his brother is asked to do Yibum because of Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo. Another case that happens is if there is a Shimon and a Levi, and Shimon does neither Yibum nor does he die. Shimon is totally doesn't do anything interesting in this entire scenario. That is, Ruvain dies without children. Shimon doesn't do anything. Levi is then born. Levi is hustled to Yibum because of Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo. Now, had Shimon done Yibum, it would have removed the din of Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo because he would have taken her as his wife. She would no longer be considered the wife of Ruvain. That's not the Ba'olamo of Shimon. Had Shimon died also, then that would have been the end of this entire experience of Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo, because we would have viewed Shimon as being her Zika. She had a Zika to Shimon. that Shimon had died, had ended the Zika, that would have taken over Reuven's relationship with her, and we would have viewed Shimon as if he was married to her with the Zika, and that ended with the death of Shimon, and then it would be a new Yibum relationship based on that. However, if Shimon didn't do anything, then it makes no change, and the complete regular Yibum connection between Reuven and Levi exists, and it was Lo Haya Ba'olamo, and therefore that Aser is because of Eishes Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. The Gemara now wants to analyze and understand Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Rabbi Shimon holds there's no problem in either of these cases of Eishes Shelo Haya Ba'olamo, even if Levi was born before the Yibum happened by Shimon. So why not? Why didn't we say that when Levi was born, this woman was Asartim, she had a Zika to him? So Gemara says, obviously, Shimon holds Yesh Zika, and the fact that this woman had a Zika to obviously Rabbi Shimon holds Yesh Zika, the fact that this woman had a Zika to the brother of Shimon is considered as if he was already married to her, and therefore by the time Levi shows up on the scene, she's already connected to Shimon, and Levi's out of the picture, and that doesn't create an Isser Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. We view it as if there's no connection to him, because she already had the pre-existing Zika to Shimon. So you're telling me, therefore, the Gemara says that Shimon holds Yesh Zika. The problem is, I'll show you clearly that Shimon holds Ein Zika, and Shimon is Mesupik. That is, he's not sure if you say Zika or not, and that's even in a case where it's just Maimer around. He's not sure if there's a Zika. Certainly, if it's not Maimer, if there's nothing at all, he should be worried if there's a Zika or not. So what's the case? Where do you see that he holds that there's a suffix Zika or not? So the Gemara quotes a case of the opinion of the Chachamim, and then the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, and that's if you have three brothers married to three sisters, that are three brothers, that are married to three women. Three women are not sisters, they are unrelated to each other. These three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven dies without children. His wife falls to Shimon, who has his own wife. Shimon does Maimer, and then Shimon dies without children, and his wife and the Maimer of Reuven's wife fall to Levi. So the Tanakama here says they both require Chalitza and not Yibum, because the woman who was Reuven's wife is falling from two different Yibums. She's married to Shimon through Maimer, and she has Yibum from that, and that did not undo completely her Yibum from Reuven, because this was only Maimer, and therefore she also has Yibum as Reuven's wife. So when she comes to Levi, she comes to him from two different Yibum scenarios, from two different men, Reuven's wife as well as Shimon's Maimer wife. And the Tanakh therefore says two Yibums you can't have. It says Umeis Echad Mehem, you can only have a woman coming from one Yibum, and therefore she's Aser to do Yibum, she has to do Chalitza. Now, Rabbi Shimon disagrees. He holds halachas, he's allowed to do Yibum to whichever one he wants. However, the second one requires Chalitza and cannot be set free without anything, and she can't have Yibum. What's the reasoning? So Rabbi Shimon explains as follows. I'm not worried about the Maimer. The Maimer is either a marriage or it's not a marriage. I don't know which one it is, but it's not quasi. It's not both. So whichever one it is, it's not an issue. If it's a marriage, then you have two women that are married to Shimon. No problem. The original marriage to Reuven's over. Two women that are married to Shimon, so he could choose whichever one he wants to do Yibum to. If Yibum is not a marriage, so then she's coming from Reuven, she's Reuven's wife, and then you have the other woman who's Shimon's wife. Reuven and Shimon are both died without children. They both fell to Yibum. So the Maimer doesn't change anything here. It's one or the other, I don't know which one, but that doesn't create an Isser. It doesn't create a problem. The problem is the Zika. That is, Reuven's wife had a Zika into Shimon, and therefore she's Shimon's Zikuka, and may therefore be considered Shimon's wife. And I don't know if she is or if she isn't. Now, if she was considered to be Shimon's wife, then you can't do Yibum to both of these women because it's two tsaras in the same marriage to Shimon, and you can only do Yibum to one of them. The second one goes back to Mr. Eshesach. So once he does Yibum to one of them, the other one cannot do Yibum, that's for sure. However, she also can't be set free without anything, because the Zika might be nothing, and if the Zika is nothing, then she is Reuven's wife. She's Reuven's wife, then she has a Yibum. independent of Shimon's wife's Yibum. It's two different Yibums from two different brothers, and he really could do Yibum to both of them in that scenario, and he has to at least do Chalitza. So therefore we can't have her be set free with nothing because she may be falling to Yibum from Ruvain and not Shimon. We can't have her do Yibum because she may be falling to Yibum from Shimon as well as Shimon's original wife, and you have two women from the same man falling to Yibum. Therefore, he can marry whichever one he wants first, and the second one requires Chalitza and not Yibum. Either way, you see here that Shimon's Mesopik, and we're left with a kasha. How could you tell me that Shimon clearly holds a Zika when here he clearly holds that he clearly shows that he's not sure whether there's a Zika or not?